Everyone, Christine here. Welcome back to my channel. I wanted to share a couple Shabby Chic Mermaid cards with you, and I was totally inspired by one of the Polkadoodles designers. I believe her name is Debbie Dolphin, and I'm going to see if I can find the link to her blog to one of the cards that she created. And the paper line I used is from Stamperia or Stamperia. And of course I used a pre-colored Polkadoodles image. And you'll notice that they're slightly different in color because my printer was going out at the time I printed them. And let's see, and I also used my favorite spellbinder dies, floral ovals, and another shape die. And I also used a memory box branch die and a diamond dies grass die, and I'll explain that in just a bit. So let me bring this up a little bit closer. So I didn't have a 6x6 shape die, so I created my own shape. And what I did was I added along the edges, I added some texture paste on this one, and the second one I used gesso mixed with Snow-Tex. And so I layered my papers, and I have a doily and some cheesecloth in the background. And let's see, and I'll start here. So this is where I have the branch punch here. I added a couple, layered them at different levels. And I also took some thin pieces of paper. I twirled it around a toothpick and added some water to it to keep the curl. And so I added that amongst my seaweed cluster. And I also used my Martha Stewart leaf punch in different colors, in white, green, and lavender. And I also used some cheesecloth mixed within. And I do have some a seahorse charm, a little turtle charm. And here's the my flowers. I believe these are 49th Market or 49 on Market. And this is where I use the diamond dies grass die, and I just kind of incorporated it into like the seaweed and the flowers, and in front of some of the shells. And where you see the shells, I have cheesecloth underneath and above the shells, and the shells I painted white. And then I also have another cluster here, same thing with my Martha Stewart punch and this flower here, and another seahorse and shell. I do have a teeny tiny little fish that I just hand cut myself. I didn't have any fish dies or a die that was this teeny. So I have one here, and I have another one, let me see, here. You can barely see it. And that took me some time, so I didn't do it on the other card. And so let me see what else here. So also on these little bubbles here are from My Favorite Things. And this is where I added my sentiment stamps. Those are from Fiskars, if I didn't mention that earlier. And this little clay flower, I believe that's probably from Natasha's Scrapbook Corner, or I Am Mama 24 when she used to have her store. And I have a little sequin here. And I also have some rhinestones here. And let's see, and I also have a tiny little cluster up here. I have that same diamond dies with a flower and a little shell. And this little heart that I painted white, that's from Lady Cree. Thank you, sweetie. And then I added some cheesecloth in that too. And I think that's it. And I tried to create like a little rock for like a landing. Can't really tell because everything gets covered up. And on the back here, I did my own little easel. And I got my stamp. And I just used some ribbon. And I think that's it. So those are my cards. If you guys have any questions, let me know. And if you're interested in seeing how I created these, I do have a process tutorial. And I thank you all for watching. Bye for now. So I'm starting off by taking a 5.5 by 5.5 sheet of paper and just tracing some of my dies just to get the edges and some points. And then I'm just gonna kind of hand draw them together, and I'm gonna fold it in fours and cut out my shape. And then I trace it onto cardstock so I can get a thicker piece of paper. And then I'm going to take, this is called a Magic Matter. I had this for probably over 15 years. And I'm taking the 1/8 inch matter to create a 1/8 inch mat. And then I'll cut that out and trace that onto some pattern paper. And now I'm just using white gesso to gesso my papers, just to lighten them up a little bit, give them that shabby look. And I'm using my favorite Spellbinder dies and a Diamond Dies grass die and a Memory Box branch die. And I've already cut out all of my die cuts. And I'm just going to start to put my design together. And I always add a paper doily on just about all of my projects. And I used a Martha Stewart punch, and I punched out some branches in white and green and lavender colors. And now I'm taking my grass die cut, and I'm just folding them back and forth. And I love that this is double-sided paper, so you can see the variegated colors. And here are some plastic shells that I painted with white paint. I took some very thin strips of paper in white and lavender and wrapped them around a toothpick. And I couldn't find my water bottle spray, so I just used a wet paper towel to dampen it, to kind of keep the curl. And now I'm just adding some cheesecloth to go into my design, and I also want to add under my layers. And I'm going to start gluing all of my layers together, starting with my papers, and then I'm going to add my paper doily. And then I wanted to hand cut a rock, if you will, as a landing for all of my layers. And as you can see, I'm constantly dry fitting everything before I glue everything down. And now I'm just placing my shells where I want, and my seahorse and my little turtle that I've painted in white. But I still haven't glued anything down yet. I'm still trying to put my design together. Now with the Martha Stewart branches, my thought process was to kind of variegate the colors so it could be like a white, green, or white, purple, green, etc. And now I'm just taking some strips of paper and tearing them, and these are going to be part of my layers. And I do gesso these papers, but I don't show them on camera. I just wanted to save some time on the video. And I add some layers on the bottom and on the sides. And now I'm going to start gluing all of my layers together, starting with my torn strips of paper. And then I add my floral oval die cut, and then I'll add my Polkadoodles image. I just love this image. I'm so thankful that it's already pre-colored. And I'm going to glue down my rock and then my other layers on top of that. And I'm going to start to add my branches, and this is kind of like my coral. And you'll see me in a few minutes pull it back up because I forgot to add some cheesecloth underneath that. And here's my second branch, and I bring it down a little bit lower just to give it some interest. And this is when I realized I forgot to add the cheesecloth. And now I'm just arranging my flowers how I want them, and I want to add some of the seaweed grass. I add some behind and in front of the flowers. And I'm also tucking behind some of the flowers the Martha Stewart branch dies behind them, and that's kind of like my seaweed cluster. And I'm looking for the perfect spot to add my little seahorse, but to make sure that you can kind of see it, I wanted to add a green branch die cut so it'll give it some contrast. And now I'm just building onto my seaweed cluster and adding more branches. And I'm trying to variegate the colors by doing like white, green, purple, or, in other words, not doing white and white together if I can help it. And you'll see at one point I do pull one out because I didn't like the two colors next to each other. And then I'm finding a little spot for my little turtle there and gluing him in place. And I'm grabbing my curly cues to kind of dry fit it and see if I like it there. I do glue it down there, and then I pull it up, put it on the other side, and then I change my mind again and I put it back on the other side. And on the right side, I'm adding some branches, and I want them at a lower height. And before I glue them down, I wanted to add more cheesecloth, like I did on the other side. And this is where I decide I pulled up one of the branches. That's just my OCD. I really wanted to alternate the colors a little bit. And this is where I also pull up that curly cue, put it on the other side, and then you'll see me bring it back. And so I'm still continuing to build my seaweed cluster on the right side. And I did add a flower to the bottom right, but I must have lost my footage somewhere. I hand cut these tiny little fishies, and I added one to both sides of the card, and you can barely see them. But yes, these took me forever. And now I'm adding my seashells and on top of some cheesecloth that I've already laid down. And I want to make sure I have some seaweed grass behind some of the shells as well. And I'm also adding more cheesecloth on top of the shells to kind of add to my seaweed effect. And now I'm going to create a little flower cluster on the upper right hand side, and I just flatten the flower in half, and I want to add my seaweed grass with a mixture of cheesecloth. And now I'm adding some texture paste all around the card, as well as all over the flowers and the branches, just to give it some extra texture. And I'm kind of finding that I still prefer snow text mixed with gesso. And now I'm adding some clear bubbles that I got from Recollections and My Favorite Things. And I'm also adding some little pearls here and there, and I like to use a stick pin to make it easier to apply using my glue gun. And I'm just adding a little clay flower to her hair, and I do add a little sequin next to that to cover the other flower. And so now I'll just continue to build on all of my layers by adding more seaweed grass and more branches here and there. And I'm also adding a little shell in this section because I think it needed a little something. I've already added my stickles, but I do go over the whole card later on with another thing of stickles. And again, I'm still continuing to add my branches and any more seaweed grass here and there. Now all I'm doing is just filling in some empty spaces where I feel that they need branches or more seaweed grass, and that's pretty much basically it. I hope you guys enjoyed this process tutorial. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know, and I thank you all so much for watching. Bye for now.